I always believed that the greatest gift a parent could give their child was independence. The means to stand on their own 2 feet without constantly looking over their shoulder for help. For 30 years, I dedicated my life to making sure my son Ryan had every advantage I never did. I worked 80-hour weeks as an architect, saved every penny, and postponed my own dreams of traveling the world, all so that my boy could have the foundation I never had growing up. The irony wasn't lost on me when, at 57, I found myself standing in the gleaming marble entryway of a home I had designed but would never live in. A $3.2 million Mediterranean-style villa with panoramic mountain views that I was about to hand over to my only son as a wedding gift. "Dad, this is—" "I can't even find the words," Ryan stammered, his eyes wide as he took in the soaring ceilings and the natural light pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His new wife, Olivia, stood beside him, her manicured hand covering her glossy lips, eyes scanning every corner of the space with calculated precision. I smiled, trying to ignore the slight tension in my shoulders. "You deserve it, son. I wanted to give you both something special to start your new life together." Olivia's eyes finally met mine, but the warmth I searched for wasn't there. Instead, I saw something that made my stomach tighten, a flash of entitlement, quickly masked by a rehearsed smile. "James, this is beyond generous. My parents will be absolutely floored when they see it." Something in her tone made my smile falter. The way she said, "my parents," carried an unusual weight, but I brushed it aside. This was Ryan's day, my boy who had worked his way through business school, who had met every challenge I'd ever set. For him. The son who still called me every Sunday without fail, even during his busiest weeks at the investment firm. I handed him the keys, solid brass with a custom leather holder bearing his initials. "The deed is in both your names. No mortgage, no strings attached. Just promise me you'll fill it with happiness." Ryan embraced me with the same bear hug he'd given me since he was a teenager, tight enough to make my ribs protest, but I never complained. Olivia air-kissed my cheek, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering long after she'd pulled away. "We should celebrate," she announced, already pulling out her phone. "I'm calling my parents. They're only 20 minutes away." I tried to keep my expression neutral, though something about Olivia's parents had always set my teeth on edge. Harold and Maureen Carlton were old money, the kind of wealth that came with family crests and summer homes in places with hyphenated names. They'd made it painfully clear during the wedding planning that they found me lacking, a self-made architect who'd built his firm from nothing after my wife died when Ryan was just 8 years old. "Actually," I said carefully, "I thought we might celebrate just the 3 of us. I've made reservations at La Maison for dinner." Olivia's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched slightly. "Oh, but my parents would be heartbroken to miss this moment. They've been so involved in our lives." She turned to Ryan, her hand on his arm. "Darling, don't you think they should be here?" I watched my son's face, saw the momentary conflict there before he acquiesced. "Dad, would you mind? They've been really supportive through everything." And just like that, my intimate celebration slipped away. Within an hour, Harold and Maureen arrived in their gleaming Bentley, stepping into the home I'd designed with the critical eyes of appraisers at an auction. "James," Harold nodded curtly, extending a limp handshake. "Quite a gesture you've made here." "Indeed," Maureen added, running a finger along a custom marble countertop in the kitchen, though I wonder about the choice of Calicata over statuario marble. The veining in statuario has a much more elegant pattern. I bit back a retort about how the Calicata marble had been quarried from a specific region in Italy, known for its exceptional quality and durability. Instead, I smiled tightly. "The wine is open in the dining room, shall we?" What should have been a joyful evening deteriorated into an uncomfortable assessment of my gift. Harold questioned the property taxes, while Maureen dissected every design choice from the height of the ceilings to the positioning of the pool. "The west-facing exposure will make this room unbearably hot in summer," she declared with authority, despite having no background in architecture or design. Actually, I explained patiently, the windows have a special UV coating, and the roof overhang was specifically calculated to provide shade during the hottest hours while still allowing natural light. Harold chuckled as if I'd told a mildly amusing joke. Well, theory and practice are often quite different, aren't they? I suppose time will tell. By the time they left, my celebration dinner had been thoroughly overshadowed, and I returned to my modest downtown condo feeling strangely hollow. I told myself it was normal, empty nest syndrome, magnified by the grand gesture I'd just made. My son was married, settled in a beautiful home, and ready to build his own life. That was exactly what I'd worked for all these years. I threw myself into my work over the following weeks, focusing on a challenging commercial project that kept my mind occupied. Ryan called occasionally, always sounding happy but rushed. I didn't push for visits, understanding that newlyweds needed their space. It was nearly a month later when I finally received an invitation to dinner at the villa. I arrived 15 minutes early, a bottle of Ryan's favorite Cabernet in hand, only to be startled by the sight of Harold's Bentley in the circular driveway. Beside it sat Maureen's Mercedes SUV and another car I didn't recognize. The front door opened before I could ring the bell, revealing not my son or daughter-in-law, but Moren herself, dressed as if she were hosting in her own home. "James, right on time," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everyone's on the back terrace." I followed her through the house, noticing small changes that made my architect's eye twitch. New artwork that clashed with the intended aesthetic, furniture rearranged in ways that disrupted the careful flow of space I'd designed. But it wasn't my home anymore, I reminded myself. It belonged to Ryan and Olivia now. The everyone on the terrace turned out to be quite a gathering. Besides Harold, there was an older woman being introduced as Maureen's Aunt Judith, a couple presented as family friends, and a young man lounging in one of the pool chairs who I later learned was Olivia's brother Elliot. Ryan greeted me with a distracted hug, already balancing a tray of drinks. "Hey, Dad! Glad you could make it. We've got a full house tonight." I glanced around, noting the comfortable familiarity with which everyone occupied the space. "I can see that. I didn't realize you were hosting a party." "Oh, it's not a party," Olivia chimed in, appearing at my side with her arm linked through Ryan's. "Just family dinner. We do this every Thursday now." "Every Thursday?" I echoed, trying to keep my voice light. "That's nice." Harold raised his glass from across the terrace. "James, come join me. I want your opinion on the modifications we're considering for the pool area." "Modifications?" I made my way over, a knot forming in my stomach. "What modifications are you thinking about?" Harold gestured expansively toward the infinity edge pool that I'd specially designed to frame the mountain view. "We're thinking of adding a cabana on that end, and possibly extending the decking to accommodate a larger outdoor dining setup. Maureen entertains quite a bit, so we need the space." I blinked, confused. "Maureen entertains here?" Harold looked at me as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "Well, of course. Since they moved in, it's been so much more convenient having family gatherings here rather than at our place. The drive from town was becoming such a chore." "Since who moved in?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Oh, didn't Ryan tell you? Maureen and I moved into the East Wing last month. It made perfect sense, all that extra space, and we were rattling around in that big house of ours. This way, we can help the kids settle in, and Maureen can oversee the household properly." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Don't worry, we're not cramping anyone's style. The house is plenty big enough." I felt as though someone had pulled the ground from beneath my feet. The East Wing contained the private office I'd designed for Ryan, along with 2 bedrooms I'd imagined would someday belong to my grandchildren. Now Harold and Maureen had simply moved in? Throughout dinner, I observed the dynamic with growing unease. Maureen directed the household staff, staff I hadn't even realized they'd hired, with the authority of the lady of the manor. Harold dominated conversation, particularly when Ryan tried to discuss his work at the firm, and Olivia deferred to her mother on everything from the wine selection to which dishes should be served next. Most concerning was Ryan himself. My confident, ambitious son seemed diminished somehow, looking to Harold for approval and to Olivia for permission. When had this happened? How had I missed the signs? After dessert, I asked Ryan to show me the changes they'd made to the house, hoping for a moment alone with him. We walked through the main floor, where he proudly pointed out new furniture and artwork, all selected by Olivia and her mother, I noticed. "And what about your office?" I asked casually as we approached the east wing. "Are you still using it for work?" Ryan's smile faltered. "Actually, that's Dad's study now. I mean, Harold's. He needed the space for his foundation work, and I mostly work from the actual office downtown anyway." "Dad's study," I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "Ryan, can I ask you something?" I lowered my voice, aware of the other guests still chatting on the terrace. Was this the plan all along? For her parents to move in? He looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. Not exactly a plan, no. It just happened. Olivia's really close with her parents, and they've been so helpful with everything. They've actually been funding a lot of the changes to the house, the staff, the new furniture. "But this was supposed to be your home," I said quietly. "Yours and Olivia's. A place to start your own family, build your own life." "It is our home," he insisted, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. "We're just sharing it. For now." "For now," I pressed. "So they'll be moving out eventually?" The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. There was no "for now" in this arrangement. Harold and Maureen Carlton had effectively taken over the home I'd gifted to my son, and he had allowed it to happen. Before Ryan could respond, Olivia appeared in the hallway. "There you are, darling. Daddy wants to discuss the investment opportunity he mentioned earlier." She smiled at me, that same practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "James, would you mind? It's a family financial matter." Family financial matter. The exclusion was so smooth, so practiced, that I almost admired the technique. "Of course," I replied, matching her smile with one of my own. "I should be heading out anyway. Early meeting tomorrow." As Ryan walked me to the door, I searched for the right words. I wanted to shake him, to demand he stand up for himself, to reclaim the home and the life I'd worked so hard to give him. But I saw the conflict in his eyes, the invisible ties that now bound him to his new family. Any confrontation now would only push him further away. At the door, he hugged me briefly. "Thanks for coming, Dad. Sorry it wasn't more, I don't know, just us catching up." "It's all right," I said, though it wasn't. "Just remember, Ryan, this house was meant to be yours, not theirs, yours." He nodded, but his eyes slid away from mine. "I know, Dad. It's complicated." I drove home in silence. No music, no calls, just the sound of my own thoughts churning. The home I'd poured my heart into designing, the gift that represented decades of hard work and sacrifice, had been co-opted before my son even had a chance to make it his own, and he had let it happen. For the next week, I wrestled with what to do. I consulted my lawyer about the deed. Yes, it was entirely in Ryan and Olivia's names. I had relinquished all legal claim to the property. I thought about confronting Harold and Maureen directly, but what grounds did I have? They had been invited in by their daughter and my son. Then, late one Friday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ryan standing there looking exhausted and frustrated. "Dad, can I come in? I need some advice." I stepped aside, relief washing over me. "Always, son. What's going on?" He paced my living room, running his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. This was the boy I'd raised, finally breaking through the polished veneer his in-laws had lacquered over him. "It's out of control," he finally blurted. "The house, Olivia's parents, all of it. They've taken over completely. Harold's talking about knocking down walls now to expand their wing. Olivia's brother is staying in the pool house temporarily, while he finds himself. And Moren fired the housekeeper I hired because she wasn't up to standards." I kept my voice calm, though inside I was seething. "And how do you feel about all this?" "I hate it," he exclaimed, dropping onto my couch. "I feel like a guest in my own home, but every time I try to talk to Olivia about it, she either cries or accuses me of not appreciating everything her parents do for us. And the truth is, they are generous. They've spent a fortune on the place." "A place that was already a gift," I pointed out gently. "Ryan, that house was worth over $3 million. It didn't need their improvements or their money." He sighed heavily. "I know. But now it's like they've staked a claim because they've invested in it. Olivia keeps saying how lucky we are to have such supportive parents who want to be involved in our lives." "And what about your parent?" I asked quietly. "Where do I fit into this picture?" Ryan looked stricken. "Dad, you know I appreciate everything you've done. The house was... It's the most incredible gift anyone could ever give. But Olivia's parents are just so present, so insistent, and Olivia can't say no to them." "Can't or won't?" I asked, the question that had been nagging at me for weeks. He didn't answer directly, which was answer enough. "I don't know what to do, Dad. I love Olivia and I want her to be happy, but I'm drowning in that house, in their expectations." I sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder the way I used to when he was a boy wrestling with a difficult problem. "So what are you asking me, son? What advice do you need?" Ryan looked at me, his eyes clear for the first time since he'd arrived. "How do I take back my home without losing my marriage?" In that moment, I recognized the young man I'd raised, the one who faced problems head-on once he'd identified them. And I knew exactly what needed to be done. "You need to establish boundaries," I said firmly, "and I think I can help you with that. But Ryan, you have to be prepared for resistance. Real boundaries often come with real consequences." He nodded, a determination settling over his features that reminded me so much of his mother it made my chest ache. "I'm ready. Tell me what to do." As we talked late into the night, formulating a plan that would either save or destroy his marriage, I couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and sadness. Pride in the man my son still was, beneath the influence of his in-laws, and sadness that it had come to this, that the gift meant to launch his independence had instead become a gilded cage. What neither of us realized that night was just how dramatically everything would change with a single sentence, words I hadn't even planned to speak. That would send the entire Carlton family packing overnight and expose truths that had been buried for decades. But that moment was still to come, as Ryan and I sat in my modest living room, plotting the reclamation of the house that was never meant to be a battlefield. In the quiet hours of that Friday night, as Ryan finally fell asleep on my couch like he used to after late-night talks in his teenage years, I gazed out my window at the city lights and made a silent promise. The home I'd built with love would not become a monument to manipulation, not while I still had breath in my body and truth on my side. The Carlton family had no idea what was coming, or who they were truly dealing with. The weeks following Ryan's late-night visit to my apartment were filled with careful planning and discreet action. We were surgical in our approach, knowing that one misstep could collapse everything like a house of cards. My son returned home the next morning with renewed resolve in his eyes, though I knew he was walking back into the lion's den. "Call me every day," I told him as he left. "Even if it's just to say everything's normal." He nodded, embracing me tightly. "I will. And Dad, thank you for not judging me." I raised you to make your own decisions, Ryan, and to fix your mistakes when you realize you've made them. The daily calls became our lifeline. Ryan would report in whispered tones from his car during lunch breaks or from the guest bathroom, the only space in that massive home where he felt truly private. The picture he painted was worse than I'd imagined. Harold had indeed begun renovations on the East Wing, bringing in contractors without even consulting Ryan. Moren had taken to hosting luncheons for her social circle 3 times a week, parading them through the house like it was a museum exhibit. "And my daughter lives here with her husband," she would say, as if Ryan were merely an extension of the property. Most concerning was Olivia's brother Elliot, whose temporary stay had evolved into permanent residence. At 32, he had never held a job for more than 6 months and was supposedly writing a novel that no one had ever seen a page of. He spent his days lounging by the pool, inviting friends over for impromptu parties, and helping himself to the wine cellar I had, stocked as a housewarming gift. "They're draining him," I realized aloud during one of our calls. "Financially and emotionally." "I checked our accounts yesterday," Ryan confirmed, his voice tight. "Olivia's been transferring money to her parents' account. Loans, she calls them, but there's no repayment schedule. And she opened a separate credit card for Elliot's expenses that I'm responsible for." "Have you confronted her?" I tried. "She said I was being selfish, that family supports family, and if I truly loved her, I wouldn't count pennies when it comes to the people she cares about." The defeat in his voice made me grip my phone tighter. "Dad," she actually said, "it's not like you earned this money anyway. Your father handed you everything." That night I couldn't sleep. The comment gnawed at me, not just the ingratitude, but the fundamental misunderstanding of everything I had worked for, everything I had tried to teach my son. By sunrise, I had made a decision. It was time to accelerate our plan. I called my longtime friend and colleague, Marcus, who ran the most prestigious interior design firm in the city. "I need a favor," I told him, "something unusual." 3 days later, Ryan texted me. "Maureen's thrilled. Your friend Marcus just offered to feature the house in Architectural Digest. Photo shoot scheduled for 2 weeks from now." I smiled to myself. Phase 1 complete. Marcus had contacted Moren directly, spinning a story about a special issue featuring heirloom homes, properties passed down or gifted through generations. Knowing Maureen's social climbing tendencies, he'd dangled the irresistible prospect of her design sensibilities being showcased in a national publication. She had taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker. The next part of our plan required more delicate handling. I reached out to my former client, Judge Eliza Montgomery, who had become a friend over the years after I designed her family's lake house. "James, it's been too long," she greeted me warmly over lunch. "What can I do for you?" I explained the situation in careful terms, emphasizing my concerns about undue influence and financial exploitation. Eliza's expression grew serious. "This is troubling, especially the unauthorized renovations and financial transfers. Have you considered filing for an injunction?" "I don't want to torpedo my son's marriage," I replied, "but I need to protect him and the gift I gave him. What I really need is leverage." She tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. "There might be a way. Not through the courts directly, but—" She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I happen to know that the city's Historic Preservation Committee is looking at several neighborhoods for potential historic designation, including the area where your villa is located." My mind raced with the implications. Historic designation would mean any renovation or structural change would require committee approval, she confirmed with a slight smile. "And as it happens, I'm acquainted with the committee chair." By the end of lunch, arrangements had been made. The Historic Preservation Committee would be conducting a preliminary assessment of the neighborhood, with special attention to architecturally significant properties, like the Mediterranean villa. I had designed Phase 2 was in motion. Meanwhile, Ryan was laying groundwork of his own. Following our plan, he had begun casually mentioning his concerns about the household expenses to Olivia, framing it as responsible financial planning rather than criticism. "She's actually listening," he reported, surprised. I showed her the spreadsheet of our outflows, and for the first time, she seemed genuinely shocked by the numbers. "That's progress," I encouraged him. "Keep focusing on the future. Talk about your plans for a family, the security you want to build together." The mention of family had struck a chord. Olivia, it seemed, had been dropping hints about wanting to start trying for a baby, something Ryan genuinely wanted as well. The thought of bringing a child into the current household situation, however, had given him pause. I told her I couldn't imagine raising children with so many adults already competing for space and attention, Ryan said. I think it finally hit her that this isn't just about money. It's about the life we're trying to build. Small cracks were appearing in the Carlton family's facade. Harold had overheard Ryan and Olivia discussing finances and had grown noticeably cooler toward my son. Moren had begun making pointed comments about young people not understanding family loyalty, and Elliot had started spending more time away from the house, perhaps sensing that his free ride might be coming to an end. Then came the day of the Architectural Digest photo shoot. I arrived early, ostensibly to support my son, but really to ensure everything unfolded according to plan. The house was immaculate, with fresh flowers in every room and new artwork prominently displayed. Moren greeted me with unusual warmth, clearly seeing me as a connection to the prestigious magazine feature. "James, there you are. Marcus has been telling me what an influential voice you have in the design community. Why didn't you mention you could have arranged this feature months ago?" I smiled enigmatically. Some opportunities only present themselves at the right moment. The photography crew arrived right on schedule, 4 professionals with high-end equipment, led by a stern-looking woman named Sophia who had worked with Marcus for years. They weren't from Architectural Digest, of course, but they were legitimate photographers who owed Marcus favors. As they began setting up in the main living area, another vehicle pulled into the driveway, a sleek black town car with government plates. "Who's that?" Olivia asked, peering through the window. "Right on cue," Ryan answered. "I think they're from the Historic Preservation Committee. I got a notice about them assessing properties in the neighborhood." Harold frowned. "Historic preservation? What does that mean for the house?" Before Ryan could respond, the doorbell rang. I suppressed a smile as Maureen hurried to answer it, not wanting anything to disrupt her magazine feature. She returned moments later, her face tight with confusion, followed by a distinguished-looking woman in her 60s and 2 younger assistants carrying clipboards. "Everyone, this is Dr. Catherine Wells from the City Historic Preservation Committee," Maureen announced, her voice strained. "Apparently, they need to conduct an assessment of the property." Dr. Wells, actually a retired architecture professor and friend of Judge Montgomery, nodded pleasantly. "Thank you for accommodating us on such short notice. We're evaluating several properties in this area for potential historic designation." Harold stepped forward, his businessman persona taking over. "Historic designation? I wasn't aware this was being considered. What exactly does that entail?" While Dr. Wells launched into a detailed explanation about preservation guidelines, building restrictions, and the approval process for any future renovations, I watched the color drain from Harold's face. "So any modifications to the structural elements or exterior facade would require committee approval," she continued. "That includes the renovations currently underway in the East Wing." "Those renovations have already been permitted by the city," Harold interjected. Dr. Wells consulted her clipboard. "Yes, we've reviewed those permits. However, if historic designation is approved, those permits would need to be reconsidered under the new guidelines." "That's preposterous," Harold's voice rose. "We've already invested considerable money in those renovations." "I understand your concern, Mr. Carlton. However, The committee's primary obligation is to preserve architectural integrity, particularly when a property represents significant design innovation, as this one does. She glanced at me with professional appreciation. Mr. Harmon's work is quite remarkable. This villa exemplifies his distinctive approach to Mediterranean revival architecture. Moren, who had been anxiously glancing between Dr. Wells and the photography crew, stepped in. Perhaps we could discuss this another time? We're in the middle of a photo shoot for Architectural Digest. Ah, yes, Dr. Wells smiled. That actually aligns perfectly with our assessment. Properties featured in such publications often meet our criteria for cultural significance. She turned to the photography team. Would you mind if my assistants documented your session? It would be valuable for our records. The lead photographer, Sophia, exchanged a look with me before responding. That shouldn't be a problem. We'll be capturing the entire property inside and out, including the renovations. In progress? Dr. Wells asked innocently. Especially those areas, Sophia confirmed. Architectural Digest is particularly interested in how historical elements are being preserved or enhanced. Harold's face had turned an alarming shade of red. He pulled Ryan aside, speaking in a harsh whisper that was still audible to those nearby. Did you know about this historic designation nonsense? Ryan maintained the calm demeanor we had practiced. I received a notice about the assessment. I didn't realize it would conflict with the photo shoot. This isn't about the damn photo shoot, Harold hissed. This could halt all the improvements we're making. Do you have any idea how much money we've already spent? We've spent, Moren corrected, joining them. Our money has gone into making this place suitable for the family. Ryan's eyes met mine briefly before he responded. That's something I've been meaning to discuss. Olivia and I appreciate your contributions, but we've been talking about our future, our family plans. Olivia appeared at his side, her expression conflicted. Ryan, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, he said gently. Before we commit to more renovations or expenditures, we need to be clear about our vision for our home. The emphasis on our home was subtle but unmistakable. Olivia flushed, her eyes darting between her husband and her parents. Meanwhile, the photographers and the historic preservation team had begun moving methodically through the house, documenting everything from the original architectural elements to the half-completed renovations in the East Wing. Harold pulled Moren and Olivia into the kitchen for a private conversation, but the stage-whispered argument carried easily. This historic designation could tank the property value, he insisted. We need to fight this immediately. Daddy, maybe we should wait and see, Olivia began. Wait and see what? Until we've sunk another 100,000 into renovations that might never be approved? Until your brother is forced out of the pool house because it doesn't meet some arbitrary historical standard? Moren cut in, her voice tight with anger. Harold, calm down. You're making a scene in front of the photographers. I don't give a damn about the photographers. This is about protecting our investment. Our investment? Ryan's voice came from the doorway, where he stood with his arms crossed. I thought this was our home. The kitchen fell silent. Olivia looked between her husband and her father, the conflict visible on her face. I'd kept my distance during this exchange, allowing Ryan to take the lead as we'd planned. But now I moved to stand beside my son, presenting a united front. Perhaps, I suggested calmly, everyone should take a step back. The historic designation isn't a certainty yet, but it might be a good opportunity to reconsider the current living arrangements. Harold's gaze snapped to me, shrewd and suspicious. What exactly are you implying, James? Only that a house designed for a young couple starting their life together might not be the ideal multi-generational compound you're trying to create. Moren drew herself up, affronted. Are you suggesting we're imposing? We've poured money and effort into making this house a proper home? A proper home? I repeated slowly. Or a proper showcase for your social ambitions? The barb struck home. Maureen's face flushed with indignation. How dare you, after all we've done to elevate your son's lifestyle? Ryan stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. Mom, Dad, I think what my father is trying to say is that Olivia and I need to make our own decisions about our home, our future. And what decisions are those? Harold demanded, eyes narrowed. Ryan took Olivia's hand, a gesture that seemed to surprise her. That we're grateful for your support, but we need our space, our privacy, especially now that we're thinking about starting a family. The words hung in the air, charged with implication. Olivia squeezed Ryan's hand, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something genuine in her expression. Hope, mixed with uncertainty. Harold opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by Dr. Wells appearing in the kitchen doorway. Excuse me, but we've completed our preliminary assessment of the East Wing renovations, she announced. I must say, I have significant concerns about the structural modifications being made. They appear to compromise several key architectural elements that would likely be protected under historic designation. Harold's face darkened. This is absurd. These renovations were approved by licensed contractors. Approval for building code compliance is quite different from approval for historic preservation, Dr. Wells explained mildly. And I'm afraid what we're seeing goes well beyond cosmetic changes. As Harold launched into a heated defense of his renovation plans, I caught Ryan's eye and gave him a slight nod. Phase 2 was unfolding perfectly. The seeds of doubt had been planted. Doubts about the wisdom of continuing the extensive renovations, doubts about the sustainability of the current living arrangement, and most importantly, doubts about who truly controlled the future of the house. What none of them realized yet was that the most devastating revelation was still to come. The one sentence that would send them all packing hadn't yet been spoken. But the foundation had been laid, and the moment was approaching faster than any of them could imagine. As the confrontation in the kitchen escalated, with Harold demanding to see Dr. Wells' credentials and Moren frantically trying to salvage the photo shoot, I stepped outside onto the terrace for a moment of quiet. The mountains stretched before me, their peaks bathed in late afternoon sunlight. I had designed this view specifically for moments of reflection, positioning the house to capture both sunrise and sunset. Ryan joined me a few minutes later, his expression troubled but determined. They're talking about lawyers now, he said, quietly. Harold's convinced this historic designation is some kind of conspiracy against him. I smiled faintly. And what does Olivia think? She's torn. When I mentioned starting a family, something changed in her. But her parents have such a hold on her. He ran a hand through his hair. Dad, I'm not sure our plan is working. They're digging in, not backing off. Sometimes, I replied, you have to bring the whole structure down before you can rebuild it properly. Ryan studied my face. What are you thinking? Before I could answer, the glass door slid open, and Harold stepped onto the terrace, his face set in lines of barely contained fury. Ryan, we need to talk. Privately. He glanced pointedly at me. Family matters. And in that moment, I knew exactly what my next move would be. The sentence that would change everything was forming in my mind, sharp and clear as crystal. Family matters, Harold had said, the implication clear. I wasn't family, not in his estimation. Ryan straightened, something hardening in his expression. Dad stays. Anything you need to say can be said in front of him. Harold's nostrils flared. This situation affects the Carltons directly. I think we deserve a private conversation without outside interference. Outside interference? I echoed, my voice dangerously calm. Is that how you view the man who designed and gifted this home to your daughter and son-in-law? A gift with quite a few strings attached, it seems, Harold snapped. Arranging this historic designation nonsense, sabotaging our renovations. Your renovations, Ryan corrected. In our home. Harold ignored him, his attention fixed on me. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? The timing is too convenient. The property has stood for 5 years without any historic interest, and suddenly, right when we're making improvements, the committee appears. Before I could respond, the glass door slid open again. Moren emerged, followed by Olivia, Dr. Wells, and the lead photographer, Sophia. The energy had shifted. Moren's carefully maintained composure was cracking, her eyes darting nervously between her husband and the others. Harold, perhaps we should continue this discussion later, she suggested tightly. After our guests have left. There's nothing to discuss, Harold replied. James has orchestrated this entire charade to interfere with our plans for the house. Dr. Wells raised an eyebrow. I assure you, Mr. Carlton, the Historic Preservation Committee operates independently of private influence. Our assessment is based solely on architectural and cultural merit. And the Architectural Digest feature? Harold demanded, turning to Sophia. Is that also a coincidence? Sophia maintained her professional demeanor. The magazine selects properties based on their design significance. Mr. Harmon's reputation certainly factored into our interest, but the final decision was editorial. Harold laughed bitterly. More lies. This whole day has been a coordinated attack. Ryan stepped forward. Dad, Olivia, and I did not authorize the renovations you're making to the East Wing. We've been patient, we've been accommodating, but this is still our home. Our home? Harold's voice rose. Who do you think has been paying for the upgrades? The staff? The landscaping? Certainly not you with your entry-level position at the firm. Entry-level? Ryan looked genuinely confused. I'm a senior investment manager. Who got the job through my connections? Harold shot back. Let's not pretend you've earned any of this on your own merit. Not the job, not the house. Everything has been handed to you. I watched my son absorb the blow, saw the momentary flicker of doubt in his eyes before his jaw set with determination. This was the crux of it all. Harold systematically undermining Ryan's confidence, making him feel perpetually indebted, perpetually inadequate. That's enough, I said quietly. Harold turned to me with undisguised contempt. Stay out of this. James, you've done enough damage with your meddling. Harold, Moren warned, glancing anxiously at the others present. Not now, but Harold was beyond caution. No, I'm tired of tiptoeing around the issue. James built this house as a control mechanism, not a gift. He couldn't stand the thought of Ryan becoming part of our family, of having connections and opportunities beyond what his father could provide. The accusation hung in the air, so absurd that for a moment I couldn't even formulate a response. But Ryan didn't hesitate. That's not true, he said firmly. My father has never tried to control my life or my choices, even when he didn't agree with them, Harold scoffed. Then explain this elaborate scheme to derail our renovations. Explain why he's suddenly so concerned about our living arrangements. Perhaps, I suggested mildly. I'm concerned because my son came to me distressed about how his home has been commandeered, about how his marriage is being manipulated by his in-laws, about how he feels like a guest in the house I designed for him. Olivia stepped forward, her expression troubled. Ryan, is that true? You went to your father behind my back? Ryan met her gaze steadily. Yes, because every time I tried to talk to you about it, you dismissed my concerns or made me feel selfish for having them. That's not fair, she protested, though her voice lacked conviction. I thought you were happy with the arrangements. You never said, I've said it repeatedly, Ryan insisted, but you only hear what your parents tell you to hear. Moren drew herself up, affronted. That is completely uncalled for. Olivia is her own person with her own mind. Is she? I asked quietly. All eyes turned to me. From where I stand, Olivia hasn't made an independent decision since the day I met her. Every choice, from the wedding venue to the house decoration to the weekly family dinners, has been orchestrated by you and Harold. Olivia flushed, a mix of anger and embarrassment coloring her cheeks. You don't know anything about me or my relationship with my parents. I know that you transferred nearly $150,000 from your joint account to theirs in the past month alone, I replied. Money from the fund I established for your and Ryan's future. The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia looked stricken, her eyes darting to her father. You checked our accounts? She finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Ryan answered for me. I did. They're my accounts too, Olivia. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Harold stepped forward, his businessman persona taking over. Those transfers were loans for the renovations. Everything has been documented. We're creating value in this property, value that benefits you both. Without our consent, Ryan pointed out. And from what I understand, the renovations might now be in violation of potential historic preservation guidelines. Dr. Wells nodded gravely. I'm afraid any structural modifications would indeed require committee approval if the designation is granted, and based on my preliminary assessment, approval for the current renovations would be unlikely. Harold's face darkened. This is absurd. We'll fight this designation with every legal resource at our disposal. You'll fight it? Ryan echoed. With what standing? Your name isn't on the deed. No, but my daughter's is, Harold retorted. And she understands the importance of what we're trying to accomplish here. All eyes turned to Olivia, who stood frozen, caught between her husband and her father. The conflict played across her face like shadows moving across water. Doubt, loyalty, fear, defiance. Olivia. Ryan said softly. What do you want? Not what your parents want. Not what I want. What do you want for our home, our future? She looked. At him, then at her parents, then back to him. I want us to be happy. All of us. That's not an answer, Ryan pressed gently. That's an evasion. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know, Ryan. I've never had to choose before. The raw honesty of her admission seemed to surprise even her. Harold stepped toward his daughter, his expression softening to something almost paternal. Sweetheart, there's no choice to make. We're family. We support each other. We stay together. That's what the Carltons have always done. By taking over their home, I interjected. By draining their savings. By treating Ryan as an outsider in his own marriage. Harold rounded on me, mask of civility slipping. You have no right to question how we operate as a family. The Carltons have a legacy stretching back generations. What do the Harmons have? A self-made architect with delusions of grandeur? I felt a slow smile spread across my face. Is that the worst insult you can come up with, Harold? That I built something from nothing? That I earned my success through talent and hard work rather than inheriting it? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I know men like you, James. Desperate to prove themselves, to buy their way into a world they don't belong in. This house, this gift, it wasn't for Ryan. It was for your own ego. Something cold and clarifying settled in my chest. I'd tried to be patient, to let Ryan handle this his way. But Harold Carlton had just crossed a line. Tell me, Harold, I said, my voice carrying easily across the terrace. When was the last time you checked the Carlton family finances? The real numbers, not the carefully curated statements your accountants show you? His eyes narrowed. What are you implying? Only that inheritance has a way of breeding complacency. Complacency leads to carelessness. And carelessness... I paused, watching his face. Well, it can be quite expensive. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Harold's face. Brief, but unmistakable. Moren moved to his side, her hand finding his arm. Harold, he's obviously trying to provoke you, she said, though a new wariness had entered her voice. Let's continue this discussion another time, in private. But I wasn't finished. I turned to Ryan and Olivia, who were watching the exchange with visible tension. The fund I established for you two isn't just a gift. It's protected, legally structured, so that it can't be drained for purposes outside your direct benefit. I looked pointedly at Harold. Which means those loans you've been taking. They're unauthorized withdrawals, potentially prosecutable. Harold's face flushed with anger. Are you threatening legal action against your own daughter-in-law's family? Do you have any idea what that would do to their marriage? I'm not threatening anything, I replied calmly. I'm stating facts. Facts that my son and his wife should be aware of as they consider their future. The unspoken message hung in the air. I could pursue this if pushed, and Harold knew it. Ryan stepped forward, claiming the moment. I think we need to reset, all of us. He looked at his in-laws directly. I appreciate everything you've done to help us settle in. But Olivia and I need to establish our own household, our own patterns, our own family. Olivia moved to his side, hesitant, but present. Ryan's right. I love you both, but this isn't working. Not the way it is now. Maureen's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in calculation. Darling, if you're feeling overwhelmed, we can adjust. Perhaps your father and I could take a step back from the daily operations of the household. A step back? Ryan echoed. With all due respect, that's not enough. We need our home back. Completely. Harold's expression hardened. After everything we've invested? The renovations alone. We'll reimburse you, Ryan cut in, for any verifiable expenses related to the house. But the renovations stop now. Silence descended on the terrace. The standoff had reached its critical point. I watched Harold's mind working behind his eyes, assessing angles, calculating leverage. He was a businessman to his core, and he wasn't ready to concede defeat. And if we refuse? He finally asked. If we choose to continue supporting our daughter in the manner we believe is appropriate. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. The opening I needed. Then I suppose, I said quietly, I'll have to explain to the banking authorities why Carlton Investment Holdings diverted $4.3 million from their clients' pension funds into offshore accounts last quarter. The sentence hung in the air like a thunderclap in a silent room. Harold's face drained of color so rapidly I thought he might faint. Maureen gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Olivia looked confused, glancing between her father and me as if trying to decode a foreign language. Ryan, however, understood immediately. I saw it in the slight widening of his eyes, the subtle shift in his posture. We hadn't discussed this. Card, because I hadn't been certain I would need to play it. How did you... Harold began, then caught himself. That's a baseless accusation. You have no proof of anything. Don't I? I held his gaze steadily. The Burton Cahill analysis wasn't just an architectural client, Harold. They've been handling my investment portfolio for 15 years. And Martin Cahill happens to be the same man who flagged the irregularities in your firm's reporting last month. It was a calculated bluff, built on fragments of information I'd gathered through my professional network. Burton Cahill had indeed flagged concerns about Carlton Holdings, though the details were confidential. But Harold's reaction confirmed that I'd struck uncomfortably close to the truth. This is slander, he hissed. I could sue you for even suggesting. You could, I agreed. But that would invite the kind of scrutiny I imagine you're currently trying to avoid. Dr. Wells cleared her throat awkwardly. Perhaps my team and I should continue our assessment another day. Yes, Sophia added quickly. We have enough preliminary material for now. I nodded gratefully to them both, acknowledging their discretion. As they made their hasty exit from the terrace, followed by the photography assistants, an oppressive silence settled over those remaining. Olivia looked at her father, confusion giving way to suspicion. Dad? What is he talking about? What pension? Funds? Harold straightened his shoulders, regaining some composure. Your father-in-law is making wild accusations based on business matters he doesn't understand. It's a desperate attempt to drive a wedge between us. Then explain it to me, she insisted. What did he mean about offshore accounts? Olivia, this isn't the time, Moren began. It's exactly the time, Ryan interrupted. If my father is wrong, then set the record straight, here and now. Harold's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he turned to me, his voice low and dangerous. I don't know what game you're playing, James, but you've made a serious mistake. The Carltons aren't people you want as enemies. I don't want you as enemies at all, I replied honestly. I want you to respect my son and your daughter's marriage. I want you to acknowledge that this is their home, not your personal renovation project or social showcase. And I want the financial exploitation to stop. Moren stepped forward, her social mask firmly back in place. I think we've all said things in the heat of the moment that we might regret. Perhaps we should take some time to cool down, discuss matters more rationally tomorrow. There's nothing to discuss, Ryan said firmly. Dad's right. This situation isn't sustainable. Olivia and I need our privacy, our independence. Harold's eyes darted between his daughter and son-in-law, then to me, calculating again. When he spoke, his voice was controlled but threaded with tension. Very well. If that's how you feel, we'll respect your wishes. Moren and I will make arrangements to move back to our own home. And Elliot? Ryan prompted. Harold's mouth tightened. Elliot as well. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Dad? Mom? I'm not trying to push you away. I love you. But Ryan's right. We need to stand on our own. Moren moved to embrace her daughter, shooting a venomous glance at me over Olivia's shoulder. Of course, darling. We only want what's best for you. The words were right, but the tone carried an unmistakable chill. They would comply, but they wouldn't forgive. Not easily, at least. As Harold and Moren made their excuses and retreated into the house, ostensibly to begin packing, Ryan turned to me, his expression a mix of awe and concern. Dad, that thing about the pension funds was... That true? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. There have been rumors about Carlton Holdings for months. Burton Cahill did flag some concerns, but the details... I shrugged. Let's just say I connected some very speculative dots in a way that hit too close to home for Harold's comfort. You bluffed, Ryan realized, a small smile playing at his lips. I made an educated guess, I corrected. And judging by Harold's reaction, it wasn't far off the mark. Olivia had been silent, her gaze fixed on the mountains in the distance. Now she turned to us, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. My father's. Been acting strange lately, stressed, secretive. I thought it was just business pressures, but... She trailed off, then focused on me. Do you really think he's done something illegal? I chose my words carefully. I think your father is a proud man who's accustomed to being in control. Men like that sometimes make compromises they shouldn't, when that control is threatened. She nodded slowly, processing this. And what you said about the money transfers, about them being unauthorized withdrawals? That part was completely true, I confirmed. The trust fund is legally protected. It can only be used for purposes that directly benefit you and Ryan. Fresh tears welled in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I just always did what they asked. I never questioned. Ryan moved to her side, taking her hand. It's okay. We'll figure it out together. As I watched them, my son and the woman who, for all her flaws, he had chosen to love, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that the immediate crisis had been diffused, concern about the long-term fallout from my confrontation with Harold, and a cautious hope that perhaps this could be a turning point for their marriage. I should go, I said quietly, sensing they needed time alone. Let me know if you need anything. Ryan embraced me tightly. Thank you, Dad, for everything. Olivia hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged me as well, the first genuine contact we'd ever shared. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't see what was happening, how they were taking over." "It's not your fault," I told her gently. "Sometimes it's hardest to see the patterns we've been raised in." As I drove away from the villa, watching it recede in my rearview mirror, the red-tiled roof glowing in the late afternoon sun, I wondered about the ripples my single sentence had created. Would Harold and Moren truly leave as promised? Would they find more subtle ways to maintain their influence over Olivia? Would my bluff about their financial dealings come back to haunt me? One thing was certain: the dynamics had shifted irrevocably. The Carlton family wouldn't be packing overnight just because I said so, but they would leave because Harold couldn't risk the alternative. The scrutiny, the questions, the potential unraveling of whatever financial maneuvers he'd been engaged in. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "They're packing. Elliot too. You should have seen Dad's face when Mom suggested they stay until morning. Never seen him shut down so fast." I smiled grimly. Harold understood the real message behind my pointed comment: "Get out now, or I start making calls tomorrow." The exact nature of Carlton Holdings' financial irregularities might have been my speculation, but Harold's reaction had confirmed there was something there, something he couldn't afford to have examined too closely. Another text came through. "Olivia's upset but talking. Really talking, maybe for the first time. Thank you for forcing this, Dad. I know it wasn't easy." I set my phone down and continued driving toward my downtown condo, the weight of the day settling into my bones. It hadn't been easy, and it wasn't over. The Carlton family would regroup, reassess, find new angles of approach. People like Harold and Moren didn't simply concede defeat and fade away. But for tonight, at least, Ryan and Olivia would sleep in their home, their actual home, without the suffocating presence of her family dictating their every move, monitoring their every conversation. It was a start, a foundation that maybe, just maybe, they could build something authentic upon. As I pulled into my parking space, a final text came through from an unknown number. "This isn't over, James. Not by a long shot." Chai stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Harold was right about one thing. It wasn't over, but he had no idea what he was up against. The lengths I would go to protect my son, to safeguard the future I'd worked so hard to give him. The sentence that sent them packing was just the beginning. The real battle for Ryan and Olivia's independence was only just beginning, and I was prepared for whatever came next. The next morning dawned clear and quiet, the kind of crystalline autumn day that showcases the mountains in their full glory. I'd slept fitfully, my mind replaying the confrontation and analyzing potential consequences. Harold's threatening text lingered in my thoughts, despite having deleted it. My phone rang just after 8. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. "They're gone," he said without preamble. "All of them. They finished packing around midnight." I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "How's Olivia?" Confused, hurt, relieved, all of it at once. There was a pause. "She cried most of the night, but it feels different than before. More like processing than manipulation." "That's progress," I said cautiously. "She wants to talk to you, not today, but soon. To understand more about what happened yesterday." I hesitated. "Ryan, about what I said regarding her father." "I know it was partly a bluff," he interrupted, "but I also know you wouldn't have gone there without some basis. There have been rumors in financial circles. Nothing concrete enough for me to actually report, but enough to make an educated guess." Well, whatever it was, it worked. I've never seen Dad move so fast. He was on the phone half the night, speaking in that clipped, urgent tone he uses when damage control is needed. Ryan paused. "But I'm worried about the fallout. Harold Carlton isn't someone who forgives and forgets. I'm aware, I said grimly. He threatened you, didn't he? I considered downplaying it, but Ryan deserved honesty. Just a text, nothing specific. Dad, you need to be careful. I've seen how Harold operates when he feels someone has crossed him. I can handle Harold Carlton, I assured him, though the concern in my son's voice touched me. How are things at the house? Any damage from their hasty exit? Ryan gave a humorless laugh. The East Wing looks like a construction zone abandoned mid-project. Moren took most of the artwork and some furniture she'd purchased. And Elliot. Well, he apparently felt entitled to the wine collection you started for us. The cellar's practically empty. I winced. The collection had been curated over years. Bottles selected to age alongside Ryan and Olivia's marriage, to be opened on. Special anniversaries and milestones. But the house itself feels different, Ryan continued, his tone lightening. Quieter. Like it can breathe again. That's what matters, I said. The rest is just things. Replaceable. Olivia suggested we redecorate. Start fresh. Make it truly ours this time. The hint of excitement in his voice was the first genuinely positive emotion I'd heard from him in months. That sounds like a good idea. Would you help us? With the design, I mean. I know you had a specific vision when you created this place. The vision was for you to make it your own, I told him. I'd be honored to help, but only as a consultant. This is your home, Ryan. Yours and Olivia's. After we hung up, I found myself standing at my drafting table, the old-fashioned kind I still preferred for initial sketches despite all the digital tools available. Almost unconsciously, I began roughing out ideas for the East Wing redesign, envisioning what might replace Harold's aborted renovations, a nursery perhaps. Ryan had mentioned starting a family. The thought of grandchildren brought a smile to my face, though it was quickly tempered by practical concerns. If Harold was as vindictive as I feared, the coming days might bring complications that would put family planning on hold. My instincts proved correct. 3 days later, Ryan called again, his voice tight with stress. Dad, something's happening. At work. I can't get straight answers, but there's been a series of closed-door meetings with the executive team. My supervisor keeps rescheduling our check-ins. Ryan worked at Brookfield Partners, a prestigious investment firm where Harold had connections on the board of directors. Have you directly asked what's going on? I tried. All I got was vague reassurances that everything's fine, but it's not. I can feel it. I considered the situation. Do you have anyone there you trust? Someone who might give you the unvarnished truth? Maybe Sarah in compliance. She's always been straight with me, and she's not particularly loyal to the old guard. Talk to her. Discreetly. 2 hours later, Ryan called back, his voice hollow. They're pushing me out, not firing me outright. That would be too obvious. But they're stripping my client portfolio, reassigning my projects. Sarah says it came from the top, and the timing makes it pretty clear why. Harold, I said, anger rising. He's using his influence to punish you professionally. Exactly. And the worst part? The managing director pulling the strings is Paul Whitmore, the same guy who came to our wedding and called me the son he never had. The bitterness in Ryan's voice was palpable. Turns out loyalty only extends as far as Harold's approval. I paced my living room, mind racing. What does Olivia say? She's furious. Actually furious, Dad. I've never seen her stand up to her father before, but she called him this morning, and it was intense. Called him petty and vindictive. Said if he wanted to punish someone, it should be her, not me. Despite the circumstances, I felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps Olivia was finally breaking free from her parents' control. What are your options? I asked. Stay and fight a losing battle, or start looking elsewhere. My experience should make me attractive to other firms. But Harold's influence extends throughout the industry, I finished for him. Exactly. And Sarah hinted there might be whisper campaigns already starting. Nothing concrete, just subtle implications that I'm difficult to work with, that clients have complained. Classic character assassination tactics. Harold was poisoning the well, making it difficult for Ryan to land on his feet elsewhere. There might be another option, I said slowly, an idea taking shape. What if you didn't stay in traditional investment management at all? What do you mean? I've been thinking about transitioning my firm. I'm not getting any younger, and while I still love architecture, the day-to-day management has become less appealing. Dad, I'm not an architect. No, but you understand finance, client relations, and project management. The creative direction would still be mine for now, with a team of talented architects executing. What I need is someone to handle the business side, someone I trust implicitly. There was a long pause. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a partnership, eventually majority ownership when I retire, if you're interested. He seemed at a loss for words. That's a massive change. I'd need to think about it, talk to Olivia. Of course. No pressure, no timeline, just an option to consider. After we hung up, I sat in my studio, surrounded by the plans and models that represented decades of my work. I hadn't planned on having this conversation with Ryan for at least another 5 years. But Harold Carlton had forced my hand, and perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The next afternoon, I received a surprising visitor. My receptionist called up to announce that Olivia Carlton Harmon was in the lobby, asking to see me. I found her sitting rigidly in one of the modernist chairs, dressed impeccably in a tailored pantsuit, her expression unreadable. When she saw me, she stood abruptly. James, thank you for seeing me without an appointment. Of course. Would you like to come up to my office? She nodded, following me in silence to the elevator. Once we were seated in my private office with its panoramic view of the city skyline, she finally spoke. I owe you an apology, she said without preamble. For how I've treated you, how I allowed my parents to behave in your son's home. The home you gifted us, the directness surprised me. I appreciate that, Olivia. I also need to understand exactly what you know about my father's business dealings. Her gaze was steady, unflinching. What you said on the terrace wasn't a shot in the dark, was it? I considered my response carefully. I have colleagues in financial services who've mentioned irregularities at Carlton Holdings, unusual fund movements, discrepancies in reported returns. Nothing I could take to authorities as concrete evidence, but enough to make an educated guess. She nodded slowly. I always thought my father was ethically flexible in business, but I convinced myself that was just how things worked at that level, that everyone bent rules occasionally. She looked down at her hands. Ryan told me about work, about what's happening to him because of my father. I'm sorry. That can't be easy for either of you. It's not. She met my eyes again. But it's clarifying. I've spent my entire life believing my parents wanted what was best for me. Now, I see they only want what's best for them, for their image, their control. People can be complicated, Olivia. I don't think your parents don't love you. They just love you on their terms. She gave a sad smile. That's not really love, though, is it? Before I could respond, she continued. Ryan mentioned your offer. The partnership. It's just an option, something to consider. He's considering it, seriously. She leaned forward. But there's something you should know. Something I haven't even told Ryan yet. My heartbeat quickened with concern. What is it? 2 nights ago, I overheard my father on the phone. He was agitated, talking about damage control and containment. He mentioned your name. She paused. And he mentioned Burton Cahill. Said something about them digging where they shouldn't and needing to misdirect attention. The implication was clear. Harold wasn't just moving against Ryan professionally. He was potentially trying to cover financial tracks that my bluff had hit too close to exposing. Have you shared this with anyone else? She shook her head. I don't know what to do with the information. If my father is involved in something illegal and I know about it, you're in a difficult position, I acknowledged. But Olivia, this isn't your responsibility to fix or expose. Your priority right now should be supporting Ryan and establishing your independence from your parents. That's just it, she said, her voice suddenly fierce. All my life, I've been taught that family loyalty comes first. Before truth, before integrity, before everything. And look where that's led. She took a deep breath. I need to break that cycle. And maybe that starts with honesty, even when it's painful. I studied her, seeing something I hadn't noticed before, a quiet strength beneath the polished exterior. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to help Ryan, and I want to help you. If my father is using his influence to damage Ryan's career, that's wrong. If he's involved in financial impropriety, that's wrong too. Her voice wavered slightly. Even if exposing it means exposing my own father. The weight of her words hung between us. This wasn't just about reclaiming a house anymore. It was about reclaiming integrity, authenticity, the foundation of a life built on truth rather than appearances. Let me think about the best approach, I said finally. This requires careful handling. In the meantime, focus on supporting Ryan and deciding together about the partnership offer. She nodded, rising to leave. At the door, she paused. James, thank you, not just for seeing me today, but for standing up for your son when I couldn't stand up to my parents. After she left, I sat for a long time, staring out at the city below. The situation had evolved beyond anything I'd anticipated when I first confronted Harold on that terrace. What had begun as a battle for a house had become something far more consequential, potentially exposing financial malfeasance that could have wide-reaching implications. I needed counsel. Picking up my phone, I called Judge Montgomery. James, she greeted me warmly. I've been wondering how things unfolded after our little historic preservation intervention. I filled her in briefly on the confrontation and Harold's subsequent retaliation against Ryan. Not surprising, she commented. Men like Carlton are accustomed to getting their way. When they don't, they lash out. It's gone beyond lashing out. Eliza, I think we may have inadvertently stirred up something serious. I explained what Olivia had overhead and my suspicions about Carlton Holdings. There was a long pause. This is delicate territory, James. If there are genuine financial irregularities, they need to be properly investigated through official channels. But without concrete evidence, moving forward could expose you to potential defamation claims. I'm not looking to bring Harold down, I clarified. I just want to protect my son from further retaliation while he transitions to a new career path. Sometimes the best defense is a strategic offense, she mused. Not direct confrontation, but creating circumstances where attacking you or Ryan becomes too risky for Harold. What do you have in mind? Let me make some discreet inquiries. In the meantime, document everything, every instance of interference with Ryan's career, every communication from Harold or his associates, and perhaps consider accelerating your partnership plans with Ryan. The sooner he's out from under Carlton's sphere of influence, the better. After we hung up, I pulled out fresh drafting paper and began sketching in earnest. Not house plans this time, but organizational charts, transition timelines, partnership agreements. If Ryan decided to join my firm, I wanted everything prepared, every detail considered. Harold Carlton might have money and connections, but I had something more valuable. Decades of respected work, a solid firm with loyal clients, and the ability to offer my son a path forward that Harold couldn't touch. 2 days later, Ryan and Olivia arrived at my condo for dinner. The change in them was subtle but significant. A new ease in how they moved together. Ryan's hand at the small of Olivia's back, her smile more natural, less performed. We've made some decisions, Ryan announced as we settled in the living room with drinks. About the house, about work, about everything. Olivia nodded, reaching for his hand. We're going to completely renovate the East Wing. Turn it into something positive. A community space where we can host art therapy sessions for kids from the children's hospital. Olivia's idea, Ryan added, looking at his wife with genuine admiration. She's been volunteering there for years, quietly, without her parents' knowledge or approval. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. I didn't know that. A flush colored Olivia's cheeks. It wasn't something the Carltons would consider appropriate charitable work. Not prestigious enough. Not enough networking opportunities. She gave a small, defiant shrug. But it matters to me. It's a wonderful idea, I said sincerely. I'd be happy to help with the design, make it perfect for those kids. We were hoping you'd say that, Ryan smiled. And about your other offer, the partnership. He glanced at Olivia, who nodded encouragingly. We've talked it through, and I want to accept. Not just because of what's happening at Brookfield, but because it feels right. A chance to build something together, to continue what you've created, while making it partly my own. A warmth spread through my chest. I'm glad. We'll make a good team. And I'll be joining too, if you'll have me, Olivia added. Not in architecture or finance, but in client relations. I have a degree in communications that's been gathering dust while I played the role my parents expected. This was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Are you sure? It would be a significant change from professional daughter? She finished with a wry smile. Yes, I'm sure. More sure than I've been about anything in a long time. As dinner progressed, they shared more of their plans. For the house, for their careers, for the family they hoped to start soon. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and moments of genuine connection that had been absent in all our previous interactions. Near the end of the evening, my phone chimed with an email. Glancing at it discreetly, I saw it was from Judge Montgomery, with the subject line, Interesting developments are our discussion. I tucked the phone away, focusing on the moment at hand. Whatever Eliza had discovered could wait until tomorrow. Tonight was about celebrating a new beginning, a reclaimed independence, a home that was finally becoming what it was meant to be all along. As Ryan and Olivia prepared to leave, my son pulled me aside. I almost forgot to tell you. We got a letter. From Harold's attorney today. A knot formed in my stomach. What did it say? It was a formal notice that all financial support from the Carlton family is being withdrawn, as if we'd asked for or needed it in the first place. He shook his head, bemused rather than upset. They still don't get it, do they? They think this is about money, about who pays for what. They don't understand it's about autonomy, about building our own life. I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. You understand. That's what matters. After they left, I opened Eliza's email, reading it with growing amazement. She had indeed made inquiries, discreet but effective. What she'd uncovered wasn't just troubling, it was potentially explosive. Burton Cahill's concerns about Carlton Holdings had been well-founded, more so than I'd realized when making my bluff on the terrace. The regulatory authorities were already quietly investigating Harold's firm for exactly the kind of financial irregularities I'd hinted at: inappropriate fund transfers, misrepresented investment returns, possible commingling of client funds. Nothing had been proven yet, no charges filed, but the investigation was active and advancing. Harold's aggressive moves against Ryan hadn't been merely petty retaliation. They'd been part of a larger strategy of distraction and misdirection, trying to create drama elsewhere while he attempted to cover his tracks. I sat back, considering the implications. With this information, I could potentially neutralize Harold's ability to interfere with Ryan and Olivia's lives going forward. Not through direct confrontation, but through the quiet power of knowledge. Harold would have to back off completely if he understood that any continued aggression might prompt me to share what I knew with the right authorities. It wasn't the outcome I'd expected when I gifted my son that beautiful house on the mountainside. I'd imagined them enjoying the space, building their life together, perhaps raising children in the rooms I'd designed with such care. I hadn't anticipated the house becoming a battleground for control, a testing ground for boundaries, a catalyst for profound change. But sometimes gifts bring unexpected consequences. Sometimes a house becomes more than walls and windows and carefully considered spaces. Sometimes it becomes the stage for transformation, for reclaiming what matters most. As I closed my laptop and moved to the window, gazing out at the city lights, spread below like earthbound stars, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. The sentence that had sent the Carltons packing overnight had set in motion a chain of events none of us could have foreseen. But from that upheaval, something honest was emerging, not just for Ryan and Olivia, but perhaps even for Harold and Moren, who would now have to face the consequences of choices long hidden behind the veneer of wealth and social standing. The house I had designed with such care would finally become the home I had intended, not because I had controlled the outcome, but because I had given Ryan the tools and support to stand his ground, to reclaim his space, to build the life he truly wanted. The transition happened faster than any of us had anticipated. Within 3 weeks of our dinner conversation, Ryan had negotiated his exit from Brookfield Partners, turning what could have been an ugly termination into a mutually agreeable separation. The managing director, Paul Whitmore, had been noticeably relieved when Ryan proposed resigning voluntarily. He practically fell over himself agreeing to my terms, Ryan told me as we finalized the partnership documents in my office. Full severance, excellent recommendation letter, immediate release from my non-compete clause. It was like he couldn't get me out the door fast enough, but on good terms. I considered this. Harold must be feeling the heat from somewhere else. He wouldn't instruct his people to be so accommodating otherwise. That's my read, too. Whatever's happening at Carlton Holdings has him distracted. And Olivia? Has she heard anything from her parents? Ryan's expression softened. She calls her mother occasionally. The conversations are strained, mostly surface level. Maureen keeps trying to arrange lunch dates, probably hoping to reestablish influence. Olivia keeps finding excuses to postpone. And Harold? Complete radio silence. He won't even speak to her when she calls their home, just hands the phone to Maureen and walks away. I nodded, unsurprised. Harold's pride wouldn't allow him to engage until he could do so from a position of strength. And right now, with regulatory scrutiny circling his business dealings, that position was notably absent. The reality of our new professional arrangement settled in quickly. Ryan brought a fresh perspective to the firm's operations, immediately identifying inefficiencies and opportunities I'd overlooked. Olivia, to everyone's surprise, including perhaps her own, proved exceptionally skilled at client relations. Her genuine interest in people, freed from her parents' script of social climbing, transformed into a remarkable ability to understand and articulate clients' needs. She's always had these skills, Ryan observed one evening after a particularly successful client meeting. But they were channeled into maintaining her parents' social position. Now she's using them for something that actually matters to her, the renovation of the East Wing began in earnest, guided by designs I'd created with input from both Ryan and Olivia. What had been Harold and Maureen's appropriated space was being transformed into a bright, welcoming area where children from the hospital could experience art therapy in a non-clinical environment. Watching Olivia consult with child psychologists and art therapists, seeing her enthusiasm as she selected materials and equipment, I glimpsed the person she might have become had the Carltons not constrained her with their expectations. Life settled into a new, promising rhythm. Ryan and I worked well together professionally, our complementary skills strengthening the firm. Olivia blossomed in her role, gradually shedding the artificial politeness that had characterized our early interactions. And the house, that beautiful contested space, was finally becoming the home I'd envisioned for them. Then, 6 weeks after the confrontation on the terrace, the news broke. I was in a client meeting when Ryan burst into the conference room, tablet in hand, face drawn with tension. "Dad, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." He placed the tablet in front of me, open to a financial news site. The headline read, "Carlton Holdings under federal investigation for securities fraud." My clients, longtime patrons who had become friends, recognized the gravity of the moment. "We can continue this later, James," Martin Reeves said, gathering his papers. "Family matters take precedence." Once they had left, Ryan collapsed into a chair. "It's all there. Exactly what you hinted at on the terrace. Misappropriation of client funds, falsified returns, offshore accounts. The feds executed search warrants at Carlton Holdings this morning." I scanned the article, my stomach tightening. "Have you spoken to Olivia?" "She's on her way back from a client site. I haven't told her yet. Thought it would be better in person." "Wise decision," I agreed. "This will hit her hard, regardless of the recent strain with her parents." Ryan ran, a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his teenage years that it momentarily transported me back. "Dad, there's something else. They're saying the investigation was triggered by a whistleblower inside the firm, someone with access to the executive level." "Not surprising," I said. "These kinds of operations usually require multiple people to execute. Someone got nervous." "The thing is," Ryan hesitated, "the timing. The investigation apparently began in earnest just after our confrontation with Harold. After you mentioned the offshore accounts, I understood his implication immediately. You're wondering if I had something to do with it. I didn't. My comment on the terrace was an educated guess based on rumors, not insider knowledge." "But Judge Montgomery made inquiries on your behalf," Ryan pressed. "You told us she discovered the investigation was already underway." "Yes, but already. Underway is the key phrase. This started before our involvement." I leaned forward. "Ryan, I know you're concerned about how this will affect Olivia, but you need to be clear about something. We didn't cause this. Harold did, through his own actions." Ryan nodded slowly. "I know. It's going to devastate her, Dad. Whatever issues she has with her parents, she still loves them." "Of course she does. And she'll need your support, now more than ever." When Olivia arrived an hour later, her face told us she'd already seen the news. Her complexion was pale, her movements stiff as she entered my office. Ryan immediately went to her, but she held up a hand, maintaining a careful distance. "Did you know?" she asked, her voice unnaturally calm. "When you made that comment about offshore accounts on the terrace, did you actually know?" Ryan looked. To me, concern etched on his face. "No," I answered honestly. "I had heard rumors about financial irregularities at Carlton Holdings. Nothing specific enough to constitute actual knowledge." "But you suspected," she pressed. "Yes," I admitted. "Enough to make an educated guess that might pressure your father into backing off." She nodded mechanically, processing this. "My mother called. She's convinced you orchestrated this entire investigation to punish them for moving into our house." Despite the gravity of the situation, the absurdity of this claim almost made me laugh. "The federal government doesn't launch securities fraud investigations because of family squabbles, Olivia." "I know that," she snapped, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry. It's just, everything's falling apart so quickly. Their assets are frozen. They've had to retain expensive attorneys. The social fallout alone." She trailed off, then met my eyes directly. "The night I overheard my father on the phone, the conversation I told you about, should I have gone to the authorities? Then?" The question hit me like a physical blow. She was wondering if she could have prevented this public humiliation, if her silence had somehow contributed to her parents' downfall. "No," I said firmly. "What you overheard was vague, contextual. It wasn't your responsibility to report anything. And from what we're learning now, this investigation was already well underway by then." She nodded again, but I could see the guilt lingering in her eyes. "Olivia," Ryan said gently, moving to take her hand. "This isn't your fault. It's not my fault. It's not even Dad's fault. Your father made his own choices." "I know that intellectually," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it still feels like betrayal, like I should have somehow protected them." "That's what they trained you to feel," Ryan said. "That's the mindset they instilled in you. Family loyalty above all else, even when the family is in the wrong." Looked at him, tears finally spilling over. "They're still my parents, Ryan." "Yes, they are," he acknowledged, pulling her close. "And you can love them while still recognizing that they're facing the consequences of their own actions." I stepped away, giving them space for this intimate moment. Through my office window, I watched the city bustling below, people moving through their lives unaware of the personal dramas unfolding in the steel and glass towers surrounding them. Harold Carlton had spent decades building his financial empire, his social standing, his image as a paragon of success. Now it was crumbling, not because of anything I had done, but because the foundation had been rotten all along. Over the following days, more details emerged. The investigation had indeed been triggered by a whistleblower, a junior executive at Carlton Holdings who had stumbled upon discrepancies while preparing reports for investors. The fraudulent activities stretched back at least 5 years, growing more brazen as Harold became increasingly confident in his ability to manipulate the system. Most damning were the revelations about client funds. Harold had diverted millions from pension accounts managed by his firm, using the money to cover losses in riskier investments and to maintain the lavish lifestyle his family had come to expect. It was sophisticated theft, dressed up in financial jargon and hidden behind complex accounting. Olivia retreated into herself as the scandal unfolded in the media. She continued working, performing her duties with mechanical precision, but the spark I'd glimpsed in recent weeks had dimmed. Ryan was beside himself with worry. "She barely sleeps," he confided one morning as we reviewed project plans. "She's having nightmares, crying out in her sleep, and she refuses to discuss it during waking hours. Says she's processing." "Give her time," I advised. "This isn't just about her parents' legal troubles. It's about reconciling the image she had of them with the reality that's emerging." "I'm trying, but I'm worried she blames us, you and me, on some level, for exposing this, for not somehow preventing it." "That wouldn't be surprising," I acknowledged. "The Carltons raised her to see family as a fortress against the world. Now she's caught between two families, two loyalties." A week into the scandal, Moren called my office directly. My assistant, looking uncomfortable, transferred the call. "James?" she began without preamble, her voice brittle with contained emotion. "I think it's time we spoke directly." "I'm listening, Moren." "Harold is not in a good place. The legal situation is dire, as I'm sure you've gathered from the news. Our assets are frozen, our reputation in tatters." I waited, sensing there was more coming. "We need Olivia," she continued. "We need our daughter's support, emotional and frankly financial, but she's been distant, evasive. Ryan's influence, no doubt. Or perhaps she's struggling to process the revelation that her father has been defrauding people for years," I suggested mildly. "That's a gross oversimplification of a complex situation," Moren snapped. "But I didn't call to debate the case. I called because I believe you can help facilitate a reconciliation." "Why would I do that?" "Because despite everything, we're still family. Olivia is still our daughter. And I know you care about her happiness." There was a cunning in her approach that I had to admire, even as I recognized the manipulation. Moren was leveraging my concern for Olivia's well-being to draw her back into the Carlton orbit. Olivia is an adult, making her own decisions, I replied carefully. If she's maintaining distance, I have to believe she has good reasons. She's confused, influenced by Ryan and by you. The timing of this investigation, coming right after your confrontation with Harold, you can't deny it's suspicious. The federal government doesn't launch multi-year fraud investigations based on family disputes, Moren. Harold's situation is of his own making. She was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its practiced polish, revealing a rawness I'd never heard before. He could go to prison, James, for a very long time. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Maureen Carlton was facing the collapse of her entire world. Not just financial security, but social standing, identity, everything she had built her life around. I'm sorry for what you're going through, I said sincerely. But I can't interfere in Olivia's choices. I won't. Then you're condemning us to face this alone, she replied, her voice hardening again. Remember this moment, James. Remember that when Harold and I needed compassion, you chose vindictiveness. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat for a long time after that call, turning Maureen's words over in my mind. Was I being vindictive? Was my refusal to help reconcile Olivia with her parents born of lingering resentment over their attempted takeover of the house, their treatment of Ryan? No, I decided finally. This wasn't about revenge or satisfaction at seeing the Carltons brought low. It was about respecting Olivia's autonomy, something her parents had never truly done. If she chose to support them through this crisis, that would be her decision, made freely. I wouldn't influence her either way. That evening, I invited Ryan and Olivia to dinner at my condo, wanting neutral territory for what might be a difficult conversation. As we lingered over coffee, I mentioned Maureen's call. She asked me to encourage reconciliation, I explained, watching Olivia's reaction carefully. I told her I wouldn't interfere in your decisions. Olivia's face remained impassive, but her hands tightened around her coffee cup. She called me too, 3 times yesterday alone. When I finally answered, she cried about how they've been abandoned in their darkest hour. What did you say? Ryan asked gently. That I needed time, that I couldn't just pretend nothing had happened. Olivia set down her cup with deliberate care. But the truth is more complicated than that. I'm angry, not just about the fraud, but about a lifetime of manipulation, of being molded into what they wanted, of having my choices made for me. That's understandable, I said. But they're still my parents, she continued. And I can't just turn off caring about what happens to them. She looked at me directly. My father could go to prison for a very long time. Yes, I acknowledged. The charges are serious. And my mother will be alone. Everything they've built, their home, their social standing, their financial security, all gone. Ryan reached for her hand. Whatever you decide about your relationship, with them I'll support you. If you want to help them financially, emotionally, whatever, I'm with you. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. Why? After everything they did to you, to us? After how they treated your father? Why would you support me helping them? Because I love you, Ryan said simply. And they're part of you, whether we like it or not. Cutting them off completely might seem satisfying in the moment, but I'm not sure it would bring you peace in the long run. I watched this exchange with a swelling pride in my son, in his compassion, his emotional intelligence, his willingness to put Olivia's needs above his own justified resentment toward the Carltons. There's a difference, I said quietly, between supporting your parents through a difficult time and allowing them to reclaim control over your life. One is compassion, the other is capitulation. Olivia nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that distinction a lot lately, about healthy boundaries versus complete estrangement. She took a deep breath. I'm going to visit them this weekend. Just me, not Ryan. I need to see them, to understand what they're facing before I can decide what kind of relationship is possible going forward. I think that's wise, I said. She smiled faintly. You know what's strange? A few months ago, I would have been paralyzed trying to figure out what everyone wanted me to do. My parents, Ryan, even you. Now I'm mostly concerned with what feels right to me. That's growth, Ryan said, squeezing her hand. That's freedom. 2 days later, Olivia visited her parents at their home, the same sprawling mansion where she had grown up, now shadowed by scandal and impending loss. She returned to the villa late that evening, exhausted but resolute. It was worse than I imagined, she told us over a hastily assembled late dinner. The house is half empty, assets seized or sold to pay legal fees. Mother is heavily medicated, barely coherent. And father? She shook her head. He's a shell of himself, broken, desperate. What did he say? Ryan asked. He apologized, not just for the financial crimes, but for how he's treated me my entire life, for controlling every aspect of my existence, for using me as an extension of his ego. Her voice wavered. He said he'd realized too late what really matters. I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was skeptical. Deathbed conversions, or their equivalent, were easy. Living by those insights when the crisis passed was another matter entirely. He also said something about you, James. Olivia looked at me directly. He said you were right that day on the terrace, about everything. That his need for control, for dominance, had poisoned our family from the inside out. I hadn't expected that. People facing severe consequences often have moments of clarity. This felt different, genuine. She pushed her plate away, appetite gone. He's negotiating a plea deal. Substantial jail time is inevitable, but if he cooperates fully, provides evidence against others involved, it might be reduced. And your mother? Ryan asked. She'll lose almost everything. The house, the cars, the vacation properties, all being liquidated to pay restitution to victims. She'll have enough to live modestly, not destitute, but nothing like the lifestyle she's accustomed to. Olivia's gaze dropped to her hands. She asked if she could stay with us while she figures out next steps. The request hung in the air like a live grenade. After everything, the takeover of the house, the interference in their marriage, the financial exploitation, Moren was asking to move back in. Ryan's face remained carefully neutral. What did you tell her? That I needed to discuss it with you first. Olivia met his gaze. But I also told her that if she did stay with us, it would be temporary, with clear boundaries. As a guest, not as the lady of the manor. I watched my son absorb this, saw him weighing his justified wariness against his love for Olivia. I think we could manage that, he said finally, for a limited time, with very explicit ground rules. Relief washed over Olivia's face. Thank you. I know it's a lot to ask after everything. It is, Ryan agreed. But she's your mother, and despite her many flaws, you love her. As they discussed logistics, which guest room would be appropriate, how long temporary might reasonably last, what boundaries would need to be established, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Concern that Moren might revert to her controlling ways once established in their home again. Pride in Ryan's compassion and Olivia's growing strength. And a strange sort of closure, as if a circle was completing itself. The house I had designed and gifted had been commandeered by the Carltons, triggering a cascade of events that had exposed long-hidden truths and catalyzed profound change. Now, in the aftermath of collapse, the house would once again shelter a Carlton, but on entirely different terms. Not as a right, not as an entitlement, but as an act of compassion freely chosen by two people who had found their own power. Later, as I prepared to leave, Olivia walked me to the door. Thank you, she said quietly, for understanding why I need to do this, for not judging me. There's nothing to judge, I assured her. Compassion isn't weakness, Olivia. Sometimes it's the greatest strength we can show. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. I've been thinking about the East Wing renovation, the art therapy space. What about it? I want to expand the concept, not just for children from the hospital, but for adults recovering from emotional trauma, from controlling relationships. A place where people can rediscover their own voice through creative expression. The symmetry of it struck me. Transforming. The very space where Harold and Moren had exerted their control into a center for healing from exactly that kind of domination. I think that's perfect, I said. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had led us here. When I gifted that house to Ryan and Olivia, I had intended it as a foundation for their future together. I could never have anticipated the challenges that would unfold, the confrontations that would be required, or the growth that would result. The sentence that had sent the Carltons packing that day on the terrace, the bluff about offshore accounts that had hit closer to the truth than I'd realized, had been just the beginning. The real transformation had happened in the aftermath, as Ryan and Olivia discovered their own strength, their own voice, their own capacity for both boundaries and compassion. And now, as Moren prepared to return to the house under entirely new terms, another chapter was beginning. Not a repetition of the past, but something new. A chance for healing, for redefining what family could mean when built on authenticity rather than control. The house I had designed would witness it all, its spaces holding the echoes of conflict and the promise of reconciliation. In the end, perhaps that was the true gift, not just the physical structure, but the opportunity it had created for something genuine to emerge from the ruins of what had been false. Maureen Carlton arrived at the villa on a crisp Sunday afternoon. In October, a shadow of the imperious woman who had once swept through the same doorway as if she owned the place. She brought with her just 2 suitcases and a small leather handbag, all that remained of her possessions after the asset seizures and forced liquidations. Ryan and Olivia greeted her with careful warmth, helping her settle into the guest suite. In the West Wing, deliberately distanced from the East Wing that the Carltons had once commandeered. The room was comfortable but modest by Maureen's standards, furnished in a minimalist style that was the antithesis of her usual ornate preferences. I had tactfully declined the invitation to be present for her arrival, knowing my presence might complicate an already delicate situation. But Ryan called me that evening, his voice low as he described the scene. She broke down when she saw the room, he told me. Not because it wasn't grand enough, but because it was prepared with such care. Olivia had filled a vase with her mother's favorite flowers, set out fresh towels, left a selection of novels on the nightstand. Simple kindnesses that seemed to hit her harder than any rebuke could have. "How's Olivia handling it?" I asked. "It's complicated. There's relief at being able to help, anger that still surfaces in unexpected moments, and a kind of grief, I guess. For the mother she thought she knew, the life she thought her parents had built. And how are you feeling about having Maureen in your home again?" He sighed heavily. Wary, but also strangely calm. "This time she's here on our terms. The power dynamic is completely reversed." Over the following weeks, a new routine established itself. Maureen, who had never worked a day in her life, found herself with endless empty hours to fill. Olivia suggested she might help with the East Wing renovation, applying her undeniable eye for aesthetics to something constructive. "It's going well, surprisingly," Olivia reported during our weekly project meeting at the firm. "Mother has always had talent for design, just wrapped up in so much snobbery it was hard to appreciate. But now, focused on creating a healing space for others, she's different, more thoughtful. And she's respecting your leadership on the project?" I asked. Olivia smiled wryly. There are moments. Old habits emerge. But when I point them out, she actually listens. Apologizes even. That's significant progress, I observed. It is. Though I'm not sure if it's genuine growth or just the reality of her circumstances forcing compliance. Probably both, I suggested. Few people change completely, but crisis has a way of creating openings for authentic reflection. The most visible change in Moren was her appearance. Gone were the designer clothes, the perfectly coiffed hair, the statement jewelry. She dressed now in simple slacks and sweaters, wore minimal makeup, and had let her artificially blonde hair grow out, revealing strands of natural gray. Ryan noted that she rose early each morning, making coffee for everyone before they left. For work. A small domestic gesture that would have been unthinkable in her previous life, where household staff handled such tasks. I think she's trying to find ways to contribute, he mused during one of our father-son lunches. To earn her place, in a sense. How does that feel for you? Strange, he admitted. Sometimes touching, sometimes I feel manipulated. It's hard to know what's real after so many years of calculated behavior. Harold's situation, meanwhile, continued to deteriorate. His plea deal had been finalized. 15 years with the possibility of parole after 10, in exchange for extensive cooperation with investigators. The case had expanded beyond Carlton Holdings to implicate several other financial firms in what prosecutors were calling a web of systematic fraud. Moren visited him weekly at the detention center where he awaited formal sentencing, returning, each time more subdued. She shared little about these visits with Ryan, but Olivia occasionally extracted fragments. She says he's different, Olivia told me quietly one afternoon as we reviewed designs for the therapy space. Reflective, reading philosophy and history instead of financial journals, writing letters to former clients, apologizing individually to people he harmed. Prison conversions can be genuine, I allowed. When everything is stripped away, some people do find clarity. Or they're just very good at appearing to have found clarity, she countered, the skepticism in her voice revealing the wounds that remained unhealed. As the renovation of the East Wing progressed, I found myself working, alongside Moren with increasing frequency. Our initial interactions were stiff, cordial, but distant, both of us carefully avoiding mention of the confrontation that had led to this reversed state of affairs. Then, on a cold December afternoon as we reviewed material samples for the therapy, room flooring, she finally addressed the elephant in the room. You knew, didn't you? She asked without preamble, her fingers tracing the edge of a cork sample. That day on the terrace, when you mentioned offshore accounts. You knew what Harold was doing, I considered my response carefully. I had suspicions based on industry rumors. Nothing concrete enough to constitute actual knowledge. She nodded slowly. But you sensed it, the rot beneath our perfect facade. I sensed something, I acknowledged, though the extent of it surprised even me when the facts emerged. Moren set down the sample, her hands surprisingly steady. Do you know what the worst part is, James? Not the loss of status or comfort, not even Harold's incarceration, though God knows that's punishment enough. She met my eyes directly. It's realizing that our entire life together was built on quicksand, that the wealth I took such pride in, the social position I guarded so jealously, all of it was founded on theft, on hurting people we never even met. The raw honesty in her voice took me aback. This wasn't the carefully curated vulnerability she had once wielded like a social weapon. This was something rougher, unpolished, perhaps the first genuinely authentic emotion Maureen Carlton had expressed in decades. I don't expect sympathy, she continued. Certainly not from you, after how we treated you, how we tried to take over the home you created for Ryan and Olivia. She gestured at the half-finished therapy room around us. But I want you to know that I see it now. The arrogance, the entitlement. How we used Olivia as an extension of our own egos, rather than supporting her as a person in her own right. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. A sad smile crossed her face. "Because you're the only person in this situation with absolutely no obligation to be kind to me. Ryan is bound by his love for Olivia. Olivia by familial loyalty, however strained. But you could justifiably wash your hands of me entirely. Yet here you are, collaborating on this project, treating me with basic dignity despite everything." "Holding grudges requires too much energy," I said simply. "And whatever happened between us, you're still Olivia's mother. Still important to people I care about." She nodded, accepting this limited olive branch for what it was. The East Wing was going to be our domain, you know. Harold and I planned to gradually take over the entire house, room by room. We saw it as rightfully ours, or at least rightfully Olivia's, which in our minds was the same thing. Her gaze swept the transformed space. "Now it's becoming something genuinely meaningful, something healing rather than controlling." "There's a certain poetry in that," I observed. "Yes," she agreed quietly. "There is." As winter deepened, preparations for the holidays presented new emotional challenges. This would be the first Christmas with Harold in detention, the first time the Carlton family had been separated for the holiday in over 30 years. "Mother suggested we keep things low-key," Olivia explained during our firm's holiday lunch. "No tree, no decorations. She says it doesn't feel right to celebrate while Father is where he is." "And how do you feel about that?" I asked. Olivia frowned slightly. "Conflicted. I understand her sentiment, but Ryan and I had been looking forward to establishing our own holiday traditions this year. Our first real Christmas in our own home, on our own terms." "Then perhaps that's what you should do," I suggested, respectful of Maureen's grief, but not governed by it. In the end, they found a compromise, a modestly decorated tree in the main living area, simple festive touches throughout the common spaces, but leaving Maureen's suite untouched. They invited me for Christmas Eve dinner, a quiet affair that bore little resemblance to the lavish entertaining the Carltons had once been known for. Maureen made an effort that evening, dressing with care in a simple black dress, even applying light makeup. She participated in conversation, asked thoughtful questions about the firm's projects, and seemed genuinely interested in Ryan's ideas for expanding our client base. Yet an undercurrent of melancholy ran beneath her composure, visible in the way her gaze occasionally drifted to the empty chair at the end of the table, in how she sometimes paused mid-sentence as if remembering a different life. After dinner, as Olivia and Ryan cleaned up in the kitchen, Moren and I found ourselves alone on the terrace, watching snow begin to fall gently on the mountains. "Harold and I were supposed to be in Aspen this week," she said softly. "We had a standing reservation at the Little Nell for Christmas every year, the presidential suite." I didn't respond, sensing she needed to simply articulate the contrast between expectation and reality. "It's strange," she continued. "I expected to miss the luxury, the status, the envious glances, the deferential treatment. But what I actually miss is simpler, just having my family intact, knowing where we stood in the world." "The foundation may have been false," I said carefully, "but the family itself was real. Still is, even if changed." She glanced at me, surprised. "That's unexpectedly kind of you to say. It's true. Whatever I think of how you and Harold operated, your love for Olivia was never in question. Misguided in expression, perhaps, but genuine in feeling." "We did love her," Moren affirmed. "Still do. Though I'm only now learning how to show it without trying to control her life in the process." She wrapped her cardigan tighter against the chill. "Harold asked about you in his last letter. Asked if you ever visit the house. This surprised me." "What did you tell him?" "The truth. That you're here occasionally, always professional, always respectful. That you've never once gloated over our downfall or reminded us of that day on the terrace." She gave a small, sad smile. I think he expected, perhaps even hoped for, more. Retribution. It might have been easier to bear than this measured kindness. Before I could respond, the glass door slid open, and Ryan appeared. "Dessert's ready," he announced. "Mom made her famous apple tart." I raised an eyebrow at Moren. "You bake now?" A flush colored her cheeks. "I've been learning. Olivia's been teaching me. It's meditative, precise yet creative." She rose gracefully. "I should warn you, it's only my third attempt, so manage your expectations accordingly." As we enjoyed the surprisingly delicious tart, slightly lopsided but perfectly flavored, I observed the tentative new dynamics forming between Moren, Ryan, and Olivia. There was caution on all sides, moments of tension when old patterns threatened to resurface, but also genuine moments of connection, laughter that wasn't performed for social effect, questions asked out of actual interest rather than obligation. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, Olivia walked me to the door. "We've set the opening date for the therapy center," she told me, excitement brightening her eyes. "February 15th. The renovations will be completed by the end of January, which gives us 2 weeks to train volunteers and finalize programming." "That's wonderful news," I said sincerely. "You've created something meaningful out of a difficult situation." "We have," she corrected, gesturing to include both me and, somewhat surprisingly, Moren, who stood at a respectful distance in the hallway. "It's been a true collaboration." "She's being generous," Moren interjected softly. "The vision was entirely Olivia's. I've merely contributed some practical suggestions on execution." The humility in her tone was still startling to hear. I wondered, not for the first time, who Maureen Carlton might have been had she not constructed her entire identity around wealth and social position. What talents might have flourished, what authentic connections might have formed. As I drove home through the gently falling snow, I reflected on the strange journey we had all undertaken since that confrontation on the terrace. The sentence that had sent the Carltons packing had initiated a cascade of consequences none of us could have anticipated. Harold in detention awaiting formal sentencing. Maureen living as a guest in the home she had once tried to commandeer. The East Wing transformed from a battleground of control into a space for healing, and Ryan and Olivia, most importantly, finding their way toward an authentic partnership based on mutual support rather than familial expectations or social scripts. The BI. New Year arrived with fresh challenges. Harold's formal sentencing was scheduled for January 20th, and Maureen grew increasingly anxious as the date approached. Despite everything, Olivia insisted on accompanying her mother to the court proceedings, a gesture of support that clearly moved Maureen deeply. "You don't have to do this," Maureen told her the evening before the sentencing, her voice wavering as they sat in the kitchen sharing tea. I was present, finalizing some details for the therapy center with Ryan. "No one would blame you for keeping your distance. Your reputation, your standing in the community." "Mother," Olivia interrupted gently but firmly, "I'm not concerned about my standing in the community. I'm concerned about you having to face this alone. But after everything we did, this isn't about forgetting or excusing the past," Olivia explained. "It's about being present in the now. You're my mother. You're in pain. That's enough reason." Maureen's composure finally broke, tears streaming unchecked down her face. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. "It's not about deserving," Olivia replied, reaching for her mother's hand. "That kind of transactional thinking is what led to all this in the first place." The wisdom in her response struck me forcibly. In those few words, Olivia had identified the core dysfunction that had characterized the Carlton family dynamic. the constant calculation of worth based on achievement, appearance, social position, the endless ledger of who deserved what, who owed whom, who had earned their place. The sentencing proceeded as expected. Harold received 15 years with the possibility of parole after 10, along with restitution orders that would ensure any assets he might ever acquire in the future would go toward compensating his victims. The judge's remarks were scathing, highlighting the betrayal of trust inherent in financial crimes of this magnitude. The defendant used his position of privilege and authority to systematically defraud individuals who placed their financial security in his hands, the judge noted. Many of his victims were planning for retirement, for their children's education, for healthcare needs. The harm caused extends far beyond monetary loss to profound disruption of lives and dreams. Olivia stood beside her mother throughout the proceedings, a steady presence as the final legal weight descended. Moren maintained remarkable composure in the courtroom, perhaps drawing on the social training that had taught her never to display genuine emotion in public, but collapsed in the privacy of the car afterward, sobbing in her daughter's arms. Ryan had tactfully remained at home, understanding that his presence might complicate an already emotionally charged situation. When they returned, he met them at the door with quiet support, helping Moren to her room when it became clear she needed privacy to process the day's events. She asked if she could extend her stay. Olivia told me later that week during our regular project meeting. Her original plan was to look for an apartment after the sentencing was finalized, but she's not ready, emotionally or practically. How do you feel about that? I asked. Surprisingly okay with it, she admitted. The boundaries we established are working. She's contributing to the household in meaningful ways. And honestly, I think the therapy center project has given her purpose at a time when she desperately needs it. And Ryan? He's on board. Says having her here on our terms is actually helping him process his own complicated feelings about everything. That happened. She smiled slightly. Plus, it turns out she's an excellent cook now that she's actually learning. Ryan's enjoying the home-cooked meals waiting when we return from work. The therapy center opened as planned on February 15th, a crisp, sunny winter day that filled the renovated East Wing with natural light. The transformation of the space was remarkable. From Harold's half-completed monument to excess into a warm, welcoming environment designed for healing. Art supplies lined custom-built shelves. Comfortable seating areas invited conversation and reflection. A small meditation garden occupied what had been intended as Harold's private cigar lounge. Every element had been thoughtfully considered to create an atmosphere of safety and possibility. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was modest, just the four of us, along with representatives from the Children's Hospital and the local mental health association. Olivia had deliberately kept the event small, focusing on the work ahead rather than any public recognition. Moren stood slightly apart during the ceremony, elegant in simple clothing, watching with visible emotion as Olivia addressed the small gathering. When asked by a hospital administrator about her involvement, she responded with uncharacteristic humility. "This is my daughter's vision," she said simply. "I've just been fortunate enough to contribute in a small way." Later, as the guests toured the facility, Moren approached me where I stood examining the final execution of a built-in storage system I had designed. "It's remarkable," she said quietly. "What you've created here." "What we've created," I corrected, acknowledging her contribution. The material selections for the sensory areas were inspired choices. She shook her head slightly. "I'm not just talking about the center, though it is beautiful. I meant all of this. What you've helped build, for Ryan and Olivia. A foundation for a life of substance, not just appearance." Before I could respond, she continued. "I visited Harold yesterday, told him about the center, showed him photos of the completed space." Her voice softened. "He wept, James. Actually wept. Said it was the perfect redemption. The space he had. tried to claim for ego and status transformed into something genuinely meaningful. I wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected confidence. People can change, I offered finally, when circumstances force them to see clearly. Yes, she agreed, though some changes come too late to undo the damage caused. She looked across the room to where Olivia was enthusiastically showing a therapy technique to the hospital director. I hope ours haven't. As the day drew to a close and the guests departed, the four of us stood together in the center of the main therapy room, taking in the culmination of months of work and emotional processing. To new beginnings, Ryan proposed, raising a glass of sparkling cider. To healing, Olivia added. To redemption, Moren said softly. I considered my own addition to the toast, thinking of the journey that had brought us here, from the gift of a house that had triggered such unexpected consequences to this moment of tentative peace. To homes, I said finally. Not just the structures we build, but the relationships that truly shelter us. As our glasses clinked together, I reflected that the sentence which had sent the Carltons packing that day on the terrace hadn't ended the story at all. It had merely opened a new chapter, one with more authentic characters, more honest dialogue, and perhaps, eventually, a more redemptive conclusion than any of us could have imagined. 1 year passed, then 2. The therapy center in the East Wing flourished beyond anyone's expectations, drawing recognition from mental health professionals nationwide for its innovative approach to healing through creative expression. Olivia had found her calling, balancing her work at the firm with increasingly hands-on involvement in the center's programs. Her natural empathy, freed from the constraints of her parents' expectations, had blossomed into genuine leadership. Moren's temporary stay had evolved into something more permanent, though fundamentally different from her first occupation, of the house. She had gradually relocated from the guest suite to a modest apartment built over the garage, a renovation I had designed at Ryan and Olivia's request, providing Moren with independence while maintaining proximity. It's better this way, she explained to me one spring afternoon as we collaborated on designs for an expanded children's area at the center. I needed the structure of living with them while I found my footing, but now we all benefit from having separate spaces. The transformation in Moren continued to unfold in small, significant ways. She had taken a part-time position coordinating volunteers at the therapy center, applying her organizational skills and social connections to something constructive. Her formerly ornate style had been replaced by a simpler aesthetic that somehow suited her better, revealing a natural elegance that had been obscured by excess. Harold, meanwhile, was serving his sentence at a medium-security federal facility, where he had become an unlikely mentor to younger inmates, teaching basic financial literacy and legitimate business principles. His letters, which Moren sometimes shared, revealed a man engaged in genuine reckoning with his choices and their consequences. He's arranging to meet individually with former clients who are willing, Moren told me during one of our now regular design meetings. Not to excuse what he did, but to personally apologize, to hear directly about the impact of his actions. As for Ryan and Olivia, they had finally begun the family they had once discussed. Olivia was 5 months pregnant with their first child, a development that had brought joy and renewed purpose to their household. Ryan had thrived in his role at the firm, bringing fresh energy and innovative approaches that had attracted a new generation of clients. Our partnership had exceeded my expectations, allowing me to gradually step back from day-to-day operations while remaining involved in creative direction. At 60, I was finding a satisfying balance between professional engagement and personal interests, including the mentorship program for young architects I had recently established. It was on a warm evening in June, nearly 3 years after the confrontation on the terrace, that Ryan and Olivia invited me to dinner to share some news. I arrived to find the house transformed yet again, not through renovation this time, but through the subtle accumulation of genuine living. Family photos, collected art, books that showed evidence of being read rather than merely displayed, a home shaped by its inhabitants rather than by social expectation. Moren was already there, setting the table with an ease that would have been unimaginable years earlier. She greeted me warmly, without a trace of the brittle formality that had once characterized our interactions. "They're being very mysterious about this dinner," she confided, as we waited on the terrace for Ryan and Olivia to join us. "Something significant is happening." When they appeared, the news proved even more momentous than I had anticipated. The ultrasound had revealed twins, a boy and a girl, and they had made decisions about names. "For our daughter," Olivia said, her hand resting on her rounded belly, "we've chosen Eleanor, after my grandmother, my father's mother, who was actually kind and genuine despite raising a son who lost his way." Maureen's eyes filled with tears. "She would have been honored. She was the best of us." "And for our son," Ryan continued, turning, "to me, we've chosen James, after the man who not only gave us this house but helped us make it truly our home." I felt an unexpected tightness in my throat, emotion welling up before I could contain it. "I'm deeply honored," I managed finally. "There's more," Olivia added. "We've been discussing the future of this house, what it represents to all of us, and we've made a decision." Ryan took her hand, continuing their clearly rehearsed announcement. "We're establishing a trust for the property. Eventually, it will become a permanent home for the therapy center, with an endowment to ensure its operation for generations to come." "But that's decades in the future," Olivia clarified quickly. "For now, it remains our home. We'll raise our children here, create the memories and traditions we've talked about. But knowing its ultimate purpose gives special meaning to every improvement, every care we take with the property." Moren looked stunned. "Are you certain? This is an extraordinarily valuable asset." "That's precisely why it feels right," Ryan explained. "Dad gifted it to us as a foundation for our future. Extending that gift to others who are rebuilding their lives seems like the perfect evolution." As dinner progressed, we discussed the practical aspects of their vision, the legal structures needed, the leadership transition planning, the architectural considerations for eventual full conversion to a therapeutic facility. The conversation flowed with warmth and purpose, punctuated by laughter and genuine connection. Later that evening, as the sunset painted the mountains in shades of amber and rose, I found myself alone on the terrace once more, reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. Ryan joined me, 2 glasses of scotch in hand. "Quite a view," he said, passing me one of the glasses. "It's why I positioned the house exactly here," I replied. "Though I'll admit, when I designed it, I never imagined all the drama that would unfold against this backdrop." He laughed softly. "When you spoke that sentence on the terrace that day, about offshore accounts and fraud, did you have any idea what you were really setting in motion?" "None whatsoever," I admitted. "I was just trying to protect you, to help you reclaim your home." "Well, it worked, just not in the way either of us expected." He gazed out at the mountains thoughtfully. "You know what's strange? Despite everything, that happened. The takeover, the confrontation, Harold's crimes and imprisonment. I'm actually grateful for the journey." "Grateful?" I echoed, surprised. If none of that had happened, Olivia might never have broken free from her parents' influence. I might never have found the courage to establish real boundaries. The therapy center wouldn't exist. And mother-in-law. He gestured back toward the house where Moren and Olivia were deep in conversation about nursery designs. Would still be the same controlling, status-obsessed person she was. I considered his perspective. There's wisdom in finding value, even in difficult chapters. "The sentence that sent them packing changed everything," Ryan continued. "But the real transformation happened in the aftermath, in how we all chose to respond to the upheaval." As if on cue, Olivia appeared at the terrace door. Are you two solving the world's problems out here? Just reflecting on unexpected journeys, Ryan replied, reaching for her hand. She smiled, joining us at the railing. I was just telling Mom about our idea for converting the pool house into a grandparent suite. For when she's older and might need more support. She actually cried. Tears of gratitude, I hope, I said. Definitely. She said she never imagined being welcomed so completely after everything that happened. Olivia's expression grew thoughtful. When I think about how they took over this house, how they treated both of you, it still hurts. But I've also come to understand that people can change when circumstances strip away their defenses. Not everyone, Ryan noted. Some people just become more entrenched in their worst qualities under pressure. True, she acknowledged. But my mother didn't. And my father, in his own way, is trying to make amends from where he is. She placed her hand on her growing belly. I want our children to understand that redemption is possible. That mistakes, even terrible ones, don't have to define a person forever. The three of us stood in companionable silence, watching as the last light faded from the peaks and stars began to appear in the deepening blue of the sky. Below us, the therapy center wing glowed softly, a separate evening program in session, for veterans experiencing PTSD. I realized something recently, I said finally. When I gifted you this house, I thought I was providing a foundation for your future, a physical structure to shelter your life together. But what you've created, here goes far beyond anything I could have envisioned. We couldn't have done it without you, Ryan said simply. Not just the house itself, but everything that followed. Your support, your guidance, your willingness to stand firm when necessary. And your ability to show compassion when warranted, Olivia added, even toward those who hadn't earned it. Moren joined us then, wrapping a light shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. Are we having a family meeting out here? She asked lightly. Family. The word hung in the air, complex and simple all at once. We had become an unlikely family unit, no longer defined by competition or control, but by mutual respect and genuine care. The sentence that had sent the Carltons packing had initiated a journey none of us could have predicted, leading not to permanent estrangement, but to authentic reconciliation. As we stood together on that terrace, the house I had designed spreading below us with its lights glowing against the mountain darkness, I felt a profound sense of completion. The gift I had given my son had evolved into something far more significant than a luxury property. It had become a catalyst for transformation, a vehicle for healing, a true home in the deepest sense of the word. Yes, I confirmed, including Moren and my smile. A family meeting seems exactly right.